Are you interested in learning to sew, but completely overwhelmed by the prospect of all the things you need to buy and do? Then you're in the right place. Today, I'll be reviewing the essential items that you need for sewing. Hi, I'm Stacey Menton from SingingMamasHomestead.com, where we provide education for singers and professional voice users about vocal wellness on a path to whole person wellness. Today, we're talking about the essential tools for sewing for beginners. Let's get started. All right, so my grandmother taught me to sew by hand with a needle and thread when I was probably about 10 years old. I made a blanket for one of my American Girl dolls. I think it was Samantha. And I made it out of scraps of old clothes that my siblings had outgrown. My younger siblings had outgrown. Since then, I've inherited my great-grandmother's Singer 401A sewing machine and this table that came with it. And I love using it to make different things. In the near future, I'm planning a blog post / video to show you how to make the unpaper towels that I've talked about in a previous video. I'll leave a link in the description below. Before I do that, I thought it would be a good idea to review some of the basic sewing tools that you need to be able to make at least the unpaper towels, but probably lots of other things. Sewing has provided me an additional creative outlet, a source of entertainment, and an avenue to make things that would probably cost me twice as much if I wanted to purchase them in the condition that I make them. And it feeds my soul. It's been a big part of my own wellness journey, and I hope you will find some inner peace while sewing. All right, so the first thing that you're gonna need is a sewing machine. In the videos that I'm gonna make, you're gonna see me using this one, my great-grandmother's Singer 401A, in future videos, but any machine you can afford is a good choice. Something you might consider, I bought my sister one for Christmas a couple of years ago. It was a Brother, and it has some of the newer features like being able to cut the thread for you, or having a thread cutter right in this piece here where this thread goes through. But I've also heard of people finding vintage machines like this one for like 50 bucks on Facebook Marketplace or eBay. And you know, these are battle axes. They live forever. As long as they're well cared for, they just keep working, and they're made of metal parts, so they just feel really strong when you're sewing. Something I really like about them. But you can always buy something that you can afford now and then upgrade later when you figure out what kind of stuff you like to make, so you can tailor your purchase for that thing. And the other thing to keep in mind is that you can pretty much learn how to sew using a machine anywhere on YouTube. You can put in the model of the machine and then, you know, tutorial, and somebody will show you how to care for and use your machine. The beauty of the internet. All right, so let's get started about the other things that you're gonna need. So sewing machine is obviously number one. Number two, you're going to need something to measure with. This is a tape measure. Actually, this was one of my grandmother's tape measures, I believe. This is one of the ones I inherited. I can tell because it's a little dirtier than the one that I bought. But that's one thing you'll need. Also with measuring, it would be helpful to get an acrylic, this one's dirty, excuse the dirt, but it would be helpful to get an acrylic ruler. This one is 6 inches by 24 inches. And I find that this helps me make sure that I'm cutting straight edges, as well as it gives me some idea of some slants and things that I might want to cut across, so I can make sure that everything's staying nice and straight. And then you're also going to need some kind of surface to cut on. Now, if you're just going to use scissors, you can probably get away with cutting on a table. But if you want to use a rotary cutter, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, you're going to want to get something kind of like this. This is a self-healing mat by Fiskars. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But mine is 18 inches by 24 inches. and it has done me a world of good because I love cutting with a rotary cutter. All right, so that's that. And then the next thing that you're gonna wanna make sure you have is things to cut with, something sharp. So the first little thing that you're gonna want is something to cut your thread with. These are tiny little snips. I'm gonna leave lots of links in the description below for all the stuff I'm going over. I was able to find most of it on Amazon and Joann's websites. But these are Singer, and they actually came as a package set with my fabric shears. You wanna make sure that you're not just using paper scissors for cutting fabric, because the paper scissors are cheaper, yes, but they wear down a lot faster, and then your edge doesn't cut as straight and you get these like jagged edges. They're no fun. So don't do that. The other thing I like to use to kind of like clean the edges are these things called pinking shears. And they have like little ridges on them so that when you cut, they cut the ridge. And then this is my favorite cutting tool. This is a rotary cutter. And to open it, you just kind of push it down and pull. And now you've got that nice edge. I don't know if you can see that. And it does a wonder at cutting, especially straight lines, but you can cut around curves a lot easier. I find this to be the fastest way to cut most of my projects. All right, next thing you're gonna need some needles. Now I don't have my machine needles other than I have a needle right in here, but I will attach a link in the description below for some machine needles. I'm a huge fan of Singer needles because, actually I'm gonna take this one out to show you. So what I love about the Singer needles that I find is different than a lot of other brands is they have these colors. So you can see there's a red shaft and then there's this like purple color, and that means something. The red shaft just means universal needle. If it's yellow, I think that means that it's like a rounded tip for knits. They call it a ballpoint needle. And then these colors here, I think one of the things is called a shaft and one of them's a shank. I can't remember. But this color on the bottom tells you kind of like what the weight of fabric that this needle can get through the best. And then the other thing you're gonna want is a package of hand needles for hand stitching anything that needs to be hand sewn after you've kind of finished it. Sometimes there's some finishing things, sometimes there's like, especially if you're making like pillows and stuff, you can't just finish it with a machine all the time. So, well, you can get these for pretty darn cheap, and there's a lot of them. You probably will never need to buy them again. As long as you don't lose them, and losing them would be bad. They do make magnets, but that's something we can talk about down the road. They do make magnets to help you find anything that you might have dropped. And I do have those because I have children in the house. All right, and then the next thing that you're gonna wanna have are some bobbins. Now this is a very old package. I don't know what year this is from, but these were bought at Boscov's up in Pennsylvania, I'm guessing, because that's where I'm originally from. They say $1, but Boscov's was selling them for 90 cents. So that's pretty neat. That was thunder, in case you're interested. We're having a little bit of a storm tonight. The other thing with bobbins, something I recognize is, first of all, the bobbin is meant to put thread onto. So I have this lovely little kit of bobbins that have lots of different threads that I've used, or probably that my grandmothers have used too. I don't necessarily take them off. But essentially you wind the bobbin thread around the bobbin. It's the same thread that you're using usually up on the top of the machine, but to sew with a sewing machine, it takes two different threads. And so the bobbin provides the thread from underneath, and the spool of thread that you buy, which we're gonna talk about in a second, the spool sits on top and then the bottom goes underneath inside the machine, and they help lock the stitch. So buying something like this, I think I'm actually gonna include a link in the description below for a set that actually has lots of plastic bobbins in a case kind of like this one. And then the next thing you need is thread. I am a huge fan of this brand. It's called, well, it's German, so I'm pretty sure it's called Gutermann, but I don't know if they'll know that when you go to a store. They'll probably say Gutterman. I don't know, maybe they'll know it's Guterman. Who knows? Anyway, I love this thread because it tends to hold up the best. My experience with some of the other cheaper brands is that the stitches break a little bit easier, and it doesn't seem to go through my machine as easy, so I end up rethreading a lot. I don't like doing that, so I just get the good stuff now. And you'll find that thread comes in many different sizes and colors. These are just different sizes of spool. The thread is the same in this case. So it just depends how much you need. But I love this thread, and I have accumulated a lot of it over the years. I have a whole case that I keep all of these in. Something else that you'll need are some pins. At one point I bought this one and I thought that I lost it, so I ended up buying a second set. So I am set for life when it comes to pins. But what I love about this set specifically is it's got multicolor dressmaker pins, and then they call them decorative pins. I'm told that they're used a little bit more in quilting probably. I don't use the decorative ones very often, but I do love that I have the ability to have these, and I can just set this right by my machine as I'm going, and that way I can put them right in. If you don't get a kit like this where you have something to put them in really easily, you want to make sure that you also purchase some kind of pin cushion. The pin cushion is the nice thing. They also have this little sharpener thing on the end, so something to think about. All right, we're getting down to the wire here. The next thing that you're gonna wanna make sure that you have is an iron. I bought this iron. This was the iron I had in undergrad. It came with me in 2002 to Westminster Choir College. This was the iron. And it's still my iron today. It still works and it does everything I need it to. When you're using an iron to sew, you're really using it mostly just to press open seams and also to kind of lock the stitch in after you've stitched. So it's not like you're sitting there and like really trying to iron out a shirt, but honestly, this iron does that too. So why would I change? All right, and then the last little thing that I'm gonna recommend that you consider, well, two things, they're kind of like odds and ends. So the first thing is a pencil of some sort. Buying them in two different colors, which is what I'm gonna link in the description below, would be a good idea, like a white and a blue, so that you have a washable pencil that you can use to mark your fabric, and then when you wash it, the marks come out completely. And then the last thing you're gonna wanna consider is some kind of a seam ripper. This seam ripper, this part here goes into the stitch, and then you can turn it and rip the stitch. You can actually even bring it all the way up into this part and pull. There's lots of different ways to rip the seam out, but I'll tell you that I have used these ones like this and this particular one numerous times just to try to take out the stitches that I accidentally put in the wrong place. It happens. You learn, you live and you learn. Anyway, so that about does it for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning all the different things that you may need as a beginner seamstress. I'm Stacey Menton from Singing Mama's Homestead, and I wish you success on your wellness journey.